Haunted and Historic Australia. Today we have another episode of Criminals, Cutthroats and Convicts to share with you. This episode we look at Joseph Samuels, the man they couldn't kill. Joseph Samuels was born approximately 1780 and was roughly around the age of 14 when he was tried at Middlesex Session on the 20th of May 1795 for robbery and was sentenced to 7 years transportation to Australia as one of 297 convicts aboard the convict ship Minorca in 1801. It wasn't long before Joseph got in trouble. He became part of a gang, and this gang was known for robbery. And in 1803, we know that he was part of the gang that robbed Mary Breeze's house, who was a wealthy madam at that time. What we do know is that Mary must have caught the gang in the act, as she was able to identify Joseph Samuel. It was the afternoon on the 25th of August. The house of Mary Breeze was broken into and items were removed from the premises. But the gang who did this got away. Later on in the evening, one of the night watchmen, Constable Joseph Luker, was appointed to guard Mary Breeze's house should the gang come back to recover more items. Now Mary Breeze was quite wealthy, and there was a few things that a gang may steal. One of this being a desk. Now from what we understand, in the previous episode, Constable Joseph Luker disturbed the thieves while they were trying to move the desk, and it is understood that he was attacked severely and murdered with his own cutlass. Despite the murder being such a violent act, they could not confirm that there was more than one murderer, and Mary Breeze had pointed out Joseph Samuel, so they knew that he was definitely involved. There were other men that were brought up on the charges. However, as Mary was only able to point out one of the offenders as being someone she'd seen, the others were acquitted, including two constables, Isaac Simmons and William Bladder. There was no getting out of it now. Joseph Samuel was going to hang. The date of the hanging was scheduled for the 26th of September at Brickfield Hill. This was a month after the body of poor Constable Joseph Luker was found. On the morning of the 26th of September, Joseph Samuel and James Hardwick were driven by cart to Parramatta, where they would be hung at Brickfields Hill. On arrival at Brickfield Hill, Joseph Samuel and James Hardwick were ready to be hanged. A large crowd had developed around. As with most hangings, it drew a large crowd. There were military men and police on horseback, ready to hold the crowd back, should they become rowdy. The hangman readied the nooses, which at the time were made out of 5 cords of hemp, which would hold approximately 450 kilos for up to 5 minutes without breaking. In these days, it wasn't a quick method of hanging. Those hung in this manner would endure a slow death by strangulation. They would stand on a cart, and the cart would move away, and they would fall, causing the rope to tighten around their neck. However, it wasn't until the later part of the 19th century that they employed a drop method which would break the neck. Unfortunately for Joseph Samuel and James Hardwick, they were going to have a slow death. Reverend Samuel Marsden approached Joseph Samuel for a confession, in which Joseph wasn't ready to give. He attempted once again to give the names of the others who were in the gang, and that Constable Isaac Simmons was the man who killed Constable Joseph Luker. The crowd became rowdy as Constable Isaac Simmons was in the crowd watching. This created quite a disturbance. Constable Isaac Simmons was acquitted, as with the other men. It would only be Joseph Samuels who would hang for this murder. It seemed quite strange that Constable Joseph Luker could sustain such injuries if it were only one-on-one. But despite the military sending in people to investigate the situation, Joseph Samuel was the only one going to hang for the murder. Now what comes next? There are a couple of different accounts, but for the most part, the story remains the same. They readied the cart and it started to move. Joseph Samuels spent his last moments in prayer. As the cart moved forward, both men lost their footing and fell. James Hardwick began to struggle, but Joseph Samuels was a different story. The hemp rope around Joseph Samuels' neck snapped. Everybody was in shock. The crowd was crazy. And as a result, his feet hit the ground and sprained his ankle, causing him to pass out. The crowd was in uproar. This had never happened before. This was madness. The executioner quickly grabbed the man, and other military men jumped in to help. They quickly removed the rope. While Joseph Samuels was still quite unconscious, they readied him back up onto the cart. At this point, James Hardwick is still kicking about. They got Joseph Samuel back up onto the cart, put the rope around his neck while his lifeless body had to be held up. Once around his neck, they moved the cart and he slowly fell off. This time, though, the noose slipped from around his neck and his head popped out, and he fell to the ground once again. The crowd was in shock. What is happening? They must have thought this was divine intervention. Twice now. He hasn't hung. Twice. He's fallen to the ground. What was happening? Once again, the executioner grabbed Joseph Samuels. The other men helped again. They got this rope, tied it up, made sure that it wasn't going to slip, and they got him back up onto the cart and it back around his neck. This time, surely, it had to work. The cart moved. Joseph Samuel dropped again, still unconscious. The rope snapped a second time. He fell again, a third time to the floor. The crowd were in uproar again. They were yelling out that he was innocent. They were screaming for him to be released. This was divine intervention. He is not meant to be hung. He's innocent. A lot of them were screaming different things. The executioner, the military men, the police were all looking at each other, baffled. What was going on? The crowd was getting unruly, and a policeman watching the whole thing on horseback raced off to fetch the governor. Upon the governor's arrival on the scene, he inspected the ropes to check if there'd been any foul play. They all agreed, after investigating the ropes, that there'd been no attempt to cut the rope or loosen the hemp. The whole crowd were yelling among themselves that it was a sign from God. Joseph Samuel had not murdered anybody and that he deserved to be pardoned immediately. The governor must have thought the whole world had gone mad, but not wanting to upset the crowd and possibly not knowing what had actually happened, he decided that he would sentence Joseph Samuel to life imprisonment and not attempt to try and hang him again. They called upon the surgeon to look at his sprained ankle. I must assume at this point that Joseph had now been roused and someone had got to have told him what had happened. I'm 100% sure he would have been thanking his lucky stars that he'd passed out through the whole thing. We understand that Joseph recovered pretty well. His luck, however, seemed to have been used up. The governor ordered that he would be sent to Kingstown in Newcastle after a time of working in Van Diemen's Land. He was to work in the mines, but this isn't where Joseph Samuel's story ends. In 1806, he and 7 other men escaped from the settlement in a boat and were never seen or heard of again. A little while back on Darcy Street in Parramatta, there was a cafe called 3 Ropes Cafe Coffee Brewery, named after the notorious man who could not be hung. It has shut down now, and possibly it's due to the pandemic, but it was a nod to the event that happened 218 years ago. It's a shame that these little businesses are closing due to the pandemic, as this one, I understood, had great coffee too. But that's with most of the things in Sydney, unfortunately. A lot of our old historic buildings are being knocked down. So it's really important that myself and Mitch get out there and document as much as we can and story tell as much as we can, so as that these parts of our history aren't forgotten. I find it a very interesting story, how even in this day and age we believe in superstitions and we look at things unusual and unexplainable as an act of God. And it isn't the only time in history that this has happened, but we will mention this person in a later episode. Thank you for watching this episode on Joe Samuels, the man they couldn't kill. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, William Buckley, the disappearing man, as well as the first unsolved murder in the colony. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and knock on that notification bell to make sure that you're aware when we post new videos.